Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his prophet and messenger. We ask Allah to grant his sincere intentions. Again, with defending the chosen, that means the prophets and messengers, from the slander and the fabricated tales that are told about them that do not befit the office of prophethood. We spoke about Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, and we spoke about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we spoke about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, clearing them of all the false stories that they tell about them, that these stories are actually found in some books of tafsir, but we do not attribute those stories to those authors. Instead, we say that the authors, that these stories were planted in those books and that nobody should believe them. So that's one subject that many people, they don't understand properly. They think that just because it's mentioned in some book and the author is famous and known and an undisputed imam of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they think that this is enough to follow it or to believe in it, when that is not the case. Rather, we follow the rules of the religion regardless of what is found in the books, and this tells us also that the way for a Muslim to acquire the knowledge is not through just reading books. So the way that we authenticate and validate knowledge, it is through the authentic chains and not through any other method. So just reading books on its own is a dangerous thing, because like we said, there are some things in some books that are blasphemous, and even if those books are attributed to certain scholars, we exonerate those scholars from putting that type of information in the books. We say that was planted, that information was planted. So continuing on with this subject, we talked about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, that he never had a lisp, that he was not attributed with any speech impediment, that the prophets, they are clear of any physical blemish, any physical defect that would repel people away from them, and also any character flaw that would repel people away from them. None of the prophets are attributed with that. So what some people claim about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, that he was stuttering, or that he had a speech impediment, or that he had a lisp, none of that is true, and all of that is false about him. What is actually happened with Prophet Musa alayhi salam is that, like we mentioned, when he was young, when he was little, like an infant, the Pharaoh wanted to test him, and the Pharaoh put in front of him, or a test was done to prove to the Pharaoh that something that Musa did was not on purpose when he was a baby. So a lit coal was put in front of him and a date, and so he went for the lit coal, and he went as far as to try to put it in his mouth, and the lit coal, it did touch his tongue. And so that small effect of the coal on his tongue did not cause any speech impediment. It did not cause any slurring of the speech or any lisp or stuttering. And Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he was 100% understandable, and he was articulate, and the people understood him, and he did not have a speech impediment. So what's mentioned in the Quran, that he asked Allah to remove the uqdah from his tongue. He was asking Allah to remove the undetectable trace of that coal, burning coal, touching his tongue. We also talked about Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, and how he left the town that he was sent to call to al-Islam before he asked permission from Allah, and that he was reprimanded, and that he repented. He exited the town before he got the permission. It was a small sin that doesn't show vileness. And then he was swallowed by the whale. He repented and he recovered. And then his story was a story of victory. Prophet Yunus alayhi salam. So what we say about Prophet Yunus alayhi salam is that he left the town before getting the permission to leave the town, and he did not object to Allah, and he did not doubt about the power of Allah. So that's the slander that some people say about Prophet Yunus. They say that he doubted about the power of Allah, which would be blasphemous to attribute to a prophet, and whoever doubts about the power of Allah, for sure himself would be a blasphemer. And he did not object to Allah. So Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, instead what happened is he left the town before he asked permission to leave the town, and he had committed a small sin by that does not show vileness or a low character, and he repented and he was forgiven. And also we mentioned about Prophet Musa alayhi salam that he was not attributed with having a short temper, as some people say. Prophet Musa alayhi salam was very patient with the children of Israel, and they did actually do a lot of things to Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And we warned against some other stories that are fabricated about Prophet Musa, stories that they attribute to him saying blasphemous statements which are incorrect and that have no basis. Like some stories that are made up that supposedly Prophet Musa alayhi salam asked Allah, "How long have you been God?" which is of course incorrect and something that no prophet would say. طيب, so moving on. Talking about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, refuting what some people claim about him. Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. So the first thing is clearing up the story of the two men that came to him seeking an arbitration, seeking for Prophet Dawood alayhi salam to judge between them. So we're going to mention this story. So let it be known that the prophets, they are trustworthy. Hence it is impossible that they be attributed with betrayal. And all the prophets, they are chaste. Allah Ta'ala purified them and made them pure and protected them from the traps of the devil. So even though the prophets are human men, they don't have the the same weaknesses that regular human men have. So Prophet Dawood alayhi salam did not fall into betrayal, and his heart was not attached to women, as some people would like to claim. So the summarized version of the story is that these two men, they came to Prophet Dawood alayhi salam seeking a judgment from him. So these two men, they actually were human men, without a doubt, and they were not two angels. And these two men, they were partners in some sheep, and that is what's mentioned in the verse that they're talking about, na'ja, which is a female sheep. There's a word for it in English. I always forget how to pronounce this word. I think it's ew or iwi. Well, it's spelled iwi. Oh, it's a U. U. Yeah. EWE. And so it's a female sheep. So this na'ja, which is the ewe, the female sheep, what's mentioned in the Quran is that word na'ja. And so the meaning is that it's truly, literally, the two men from any human men, they were asking Prophet Dawood alayhi salam to judge between them about two female sheep. So it's not true what some people say that this was about women. The term na'ja and ni'aj was not literal, and that instead it was referring to women metaphorically. So that's not the case. So first two things about the story is that it's about two human men came to Prophet Dawood alayhi salam seeking a judgment, and they were asking about sheep, female sheep. And that one of them claimed that he was done injustice to. And so these two men, they came to the court of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. And Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he was occupied with doing acts of worship to Allah, and he did not sense their presence except after they were in front of him. So these two men, and when he sensed their presence, he asked them, what is your reason for coming here? And those two men, they explained that they want this mediation. They want Prophet Dawood alayhi salam to judge between them. And so Allah Ta'ala tested Prophet Dawood alayhi salam in this incident that occurred between him and these two men that were seeking the judgment. And so what happened is that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he judged, and he correctly, of course, he judged in this story correctly. He didn't make a mistake in his judgment. But the mistake that he made, or the thing that he repented from, is that he judged before hearing the other side of the story. So the reason that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam committed a sin, in this case a small sin that does not show a low character, is that he judged rightly, of course, he judged correctly for one of the two that came before him seeking the judgment before he heard the other side of the story. And it was an obligation upon him when he hears these claims to ask the other one, to ask both of them what their claims are, and not to judge before asking both sides. And so Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he did repent from this, and it was, like we said, a small sin that does not show a low character, and this sin was forgiven as per the explicit text of the Quran. فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ وَإِنَّ لَهُ عِنْدَنَا لَزُلْفَى وَحُسْنَ مَآبٍ. And so the part that says فَغَفَرْنَا لَهُ ذَلِكَ, it's an explicit text that he was forgiven for what he did. And also, some people, they might misunderstand this story, and they think that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he judged with the wrong judgment, which would be blasphemous to attribute to a prophet as well. So he did judge with the correct judgment. It's just that the reason that he repented is because he gave that judgment, the correct judgment, before he heard both sides. So among the slander and the lies that are said about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam is a very ugly story that is attributed to him. For sure the Christians attributed to him, for sure the Jews attributed to him, and this story is found in some books of tafsir, and it should be known that that is a blasphemous story. It is not legitimate and it has no basis. And so that story is a story that they claim, of course it's a lie, they claim that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam coveted one of his army leaders' wife and so he sent him to die in the war so he could take his wife after him. Na'udhu billah, and that is, of course, blasphemous to say about a prophet, and it is something ugly even for a person to say it about someone that's not a prophet. So among the things that are lies that are said about the prophets and what negates their office of prophethood is what is mentioned in the section that is specifically attributed to Al-Mahalli in the book Tafsir al-Jalalain. This book of tafsir, it is a famous book of tafsir that many Muslims, they have in their libraries. This is among the books that Muslims should be warned against, not to read it on their own, and to be careful about some of the things in it that have been planted. Like we said, we exonerate both of these scholars, Jalaluddin as-Suyuti and Jalaluddin al-Mahalli. We exonerate them from having put any of those incorrect things in their books. We say these were planted. And so this is among the stories that are found in Tafsir al-Jalalain, which should be warned against, and nobody should believe it about a prophet, much less even attributed to a Muslim who's not a prophet. So what they mentioned there is that they claim that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, that he was coveting another man's wife, and that that woman was married to one of his generals, and that so since he wanted her for himself, supposedly, a'udhu billah, and as they claim, he sent him to the front lines, na'udhu billah. So supposedly this is the false story that is there. They say Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was reading through Az-Zabur, and that a bird suddenly came and in front of him and got close to him. And so and of course, just remember, this story is a false story. So Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, he got closer to him, and supposedly there was a woman that was in her bath, taking a bath from her menses. She was purifying herself from her menses. So supposedly when she saw his shadow, that she took her hair and she covered her body up with her hair. And her husband supposedly was in the battlefield for the sake of Allah during that time. And that supposedly Prophet Dawood wrote to the leader of the battle to make her husband supposedly carry the Ark of the Covenant. And so supposedly he was given that duty, and usually the case was that whoever was designated for that, he would become victorious or he would be killed. And so supposedly he was killed. And that supposedly after her postmarital waiting period was over, he proposed to her. And that supposedly she made it a condition upon him that if she gave birth to a boy, that he would be the successor after him, and that supposedly she got 5 from the children of Israel to testify for that, or to be witnesses of that, and to witness that that conditional thing, and that he would write, let's say, an official document for that. And so supposedly that's how Prophet Sulaiman was born. Remember, this is not a true story. So another thing that's mentioned in this story that is not correct is that they mention that supposedly, and this of course is not true, this is it's weak, it's not correct. Supposedly the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, Dawood alayhi salam, when he looked at the woman, he wrote to the leader of the army that if the enemy comes, then make so-and-so, and he approached the enemy, and he make so-and-so get closer. Make so-and-so carry the ark or be in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And again, there's different versions of this story. So basically, the gist of it, of this fake story, is that supposedly Prophet Dawood alayhi salam wanted that husband of that woman to be put in a position where he would be killed, and that he was killed. They claim that he he wrote to the general of the army to put the husband of the woman in a position where he would be killed, which is, of course, none of that is true. Subhanallah, how could somebody attribute something like that to a prophet? So there's different versions of this story. Another version of this false story is that they say, of course it's not true, that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was doing acts of worship, and a golden dove fell on him, so he wanted to grab it and it flew away. And so he went to go grab it, and he saw the woman taking a bath, and that supposedly he fell in love with her. And her husband was a leader of the army, one of the leaders of the army. So he wanted to supposedly get rid of him so he can marry her after him. And so he supposedly sent him to a war and made him carry the banner and ordered him to march forth, and supposedly ordered his soldiers to retreat behind him until he was killed. And so supposedly he was killed, and then supposedly, and of course all that is a lie, supposedly Prophet Dawood alayhi salam married her after him. And some people, they even add an even uglier lie, lying about Prophet Dawood. They say that he fornicated with her, na'udhu billah, before he supposedly plotted this scheme. Na'udhu billah, that's ugly. And there's, like I said, many different versions of this false story. One of them is that they say that Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was walking on the roof of his house, and that he saw a woman taking a bath, and that he became obsessed with her, and that supposedly he laid with her, and she got pregnant from him, and she told him that her husband was that general in the army, and so that supposedly he summoned him, and her husband, to supposedly talk to him about the war. And basically, supposedly what he wanted is to bring him back so that he can, let's say, lay with his wife, so that there would not be any suspicion about her being pregnant while he was gone. However, that they say in the story that soldier, that leader of the army, that he was pious, and so he did not go and see his wife because he thought it to be not from the piety for him to enjoy his wife while his brothers are in the war. He felt that he wouldn't be pious if he was there enjoying his wife while his fellow soldiers were far from their wives. And so supposedly when Prophet Dawood learned about his issue or about his matter, that he did not see any way to straighten the situation except to order him to go to the front lines holding the banner, and that his soldiers would retreat from him so that he would be killed. And that supposedly that woman gave birth to a child from that fornication, and that supposedly Dawood married her, and then supposedly that child became sick, and that supposedly from this woman was Sulaiman. Na'udhu billah. And of course this story is not true. All that is blasphemy. Na'udhu billah. So many scholars, they rejected that story, of course, because Prophet Dawood alayhi salam is a prophet, and so the prophets, they have the impeccability. And those supposed narrations that are attributed to the hadith, the scholars, the masters of the hadith, they said it's weak, and so of course it would not be taken, it would not be believed. So because of the chain being weak, and because of that hadith not being sahih and not being confirmed, that's one reason why we say this story for sure is fabricated. Another reason is also the meaning of that story, because it goes against the known principle that the prophets are impeccable. And like we said, many scholars, they rejected this story. Subhanallah. But we see that the origin of many of these stories come from the children of Israel. They, of course, they killed prophets, they murdered prophets, and they said many lies about prophets. Now we will mention we'll refute and reject some of the slander and fabrications that have been said about Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Of course, Allah Ta'ala, He protected the prophets from blasphemy, enormous sins, and small abject sins. And so the prophets, they would never commit any of those things. And so among the slanderous speech and the fabrications and the lies that are attributed to our Master Sulaiman alayhi salam is that supposedly he ordered someone to do injustice, and that supposedly he ordered someone to split a child in half. Na'udhu billah. And this is impossible to attribute to the prophets. The reality of the situation is what is deduced of wisdom and a sharp mind. The wisdom and sharp mind of the Prophet of Allah, Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, and that he had this attribute of any great wisdom, just as his father, Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. So the story that is known is that there were two women that they had their sons, and so one of them was taken by a wolf. So a wolf took one of the sons of the two women. So two women, each of them had a son. One of them was taken by a wolf. And so the women were arguing for the remaining child, the remaining son. So the older woman, she said that the wolf took her son. And the younger one, she said, rather the wolf took your son. So they went to Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, and he judged for the elder one, and then they went to Prophet Sulaiman, and according to the narration, it says, bring me a knife. And in the context of rhetoric, so it wasn't like ordering them or that he's really going to do it. Rhetoric like yani and like saying something to prove a point, but not to really order with splitting the child in half. So the wording, it says literally, bring me a knife, I split him in between you, one half for you and one half for the other. And that the youngest one said, do not do that, it's her son. And so he judged for the younger one. So this is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. So when Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam said, I will split him in half, that was in the context of rhetoric. And he would, of course, believe that they would say no, or that she would say no. And the one who believes that he was ordering for that to be done, that he would literally split them in half unjustly, that would be the one who believes that would blaspheme. Yeah, those were the actual words, but not meaning like ordering to do it, or that he would actually do it, that he would do something unjust. Not that he would actually do something that is forbidden and unjust. So that is what is to be clarified about the story of Prophet Sulaiman in that case. And also another thing that is rejected from what some people say about Prophet Sulaiman, they slander him and they claim that the devil overcame him and overpowered him and took his ring, and that supposedly the devil reigned over his dominion, and that supposedly the shaitan came to his family. Na'udhu billah. So among what is lied about and said about Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam is that he got his kingdom taken away from him, and that it returned to him in a demonic, strange way. And the Muslims have agreed that the shaitan does not have any dominion or power over the prophets. So no devil is able to take over the minds of a prophet. And no devil is able to take the shape of a prophet or to enter their bodies. And so there is, in some books of tafsir, a fabrication, a story that's not true. And that is that supposedly an angel came to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam because of a jinni that wore the ring of Prophet Sulaiman after he supposedly took the shape of Sulaiman, and so he ruled for a while over the kingdom of Prophet Sulaiman. And so this is refuted with a verse from the Quran, which is that the Quran says, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ, and which means that Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam never committed blasphemy. So it is attributed or said about Jalaluddin as-Suyuti in his tafsir of Al-Jalalain that we say those false stories were planted there, and we exonerate those two authors. They would not write any of that or put that in their books. That supposedly they wrote in that supposedly that those jinn, what they did is that they took a book of sorcery and they put it under his throne, supposedly when his kingdom was taken away. So that's some of what is found in that book, Tafsir al-Jalalain, that is not correct. So we don't say that Prophet Sulaiman's dominion was taken from him. And the shayateen, the devils, they were under his control, and of course they hated that they had to listen to him. So after Prophet Sulaiman died, what the devils did is that they did plant a book of sorcery under the throne of Sulaiman, and they told the people that that's the way that he ruled over the jinn. And so some people, they believed those devils, and so they took that book and they did some of the things in it. So that's where a lot of the occult originates from. And then they say nowadays, even the so-called Freemasons, they claim that what they say is from Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. And when they build their temples, that they supposedly build it based on the description of Solomon's temple. So they have like a certain amount of pillars, a certain distance, the door has to face a certain direction, there's a certain distance from the door to the end of the hall. So they have different things that they claim comes from Prophet Sulaiman, and this is part of the reason for that, because of those fabricated stories and because of what those devils did, and they lied and claimed that the way that they were ruled over by Prophet Sulaiman is because of a book of sorcery. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. We'll continue, inshallah, talking about rejecting some of the false stories that are attributed to Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, things that are not befitting to attribute to the prophets, next week. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ربي اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم.